Happy Losar, everyone. Welcome to Buddhist Center. It's so wonderful to be here with you tonight. Before we get started, for auspicious reasons, let's recite a verse from the King of Prayers. In the language of the gods, Nagas and Yaksas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Laike dan le dan no jinge drubon da da mi gi ge nan dan drawa gunji dra nan ji zamba dan che ge du da gi ju den do. So again, Losar Tashtalik. For anyone who doesn't know, Losar is the Tibetan New Year. And if we're looking at the time in Tibet, the time in India right now, it is the Tibetan New Year. And it will be the Tibetan New Year for us here in the United States starting tomorrow. We're very fortunate to have this incredibly blessed lineage that's been passed down to us through all of these Tibetan masters. I feel so fortunate to have met with these holy beings like Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, Demolocha Rinpoche, Khenso Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, Geshe Dorje Damnu Rinpoche, Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche. So we're really blessed by the Tibetan tradition and the fact that the Tibetans really encased the Nalanda tradition in that land of snows for so much time. And really kept it pure and were able to write so many commentaries because there were so many practitioners who were actually becoming realized through the tradition. We have all these rich commentaries that help us to understand how to evolve our own minds through the stages of the path. So tonight, once again, we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. This little short poem, 14 stanzas, the source of all my good, or the foundation of all good qualities, that contains everything that Buddha Shakyamuni ever taught that would show a being how to go from wherever he or she is at in terms of spiritual kind of place to a place of perfection, to a place of complete Buddhahood, complete reliability, perfect love and compassion, perfect skillful means and power, perfect wisdom, this perfect kind of excellent quality of just caring for everybody in an unbiased way. And this other perfect excellent quality, when combined with it, it becomes so effective, which is the understanding of reality and diversity simultaneously, meaning all phenomena have two natures, conventional and ultimate truth. And ordinary beings can only perceive one or the other, and the ultimate truth being perceived is uber, super rare. It doesn't really happen. And when it does, to even Arya beings who see emptiness directly, when they come out of it, there's this duality, and they no longer are seeing the ultimate truth and can only see the conventional truth. So that's a real block to being able to help everyone and having one's mind expand to all phenomena. And the Buddha doesn't have that kind of block. So I can go from where I'm at right now to a place where I don't have that block. I haven't seen emptiness, so I haven't even realized that, the one side of this coin of, when I say coin, every phenomena has kind of two sides of its coin. That's the conventional and ultimate truth. And I've never realized anything more than one side of that coin. But I've been given signs and reasonings to understand that there is another side of that coin, and I can realize another side of that coin. And once we start to get to know what the other side of that coin is, the other side of this kind of conventional truth, the other part of its the nature of all phenomena has this conventional truth and ultimate truth. Once we get to know the other side of it, it makes us kind of understand that the way we've been perceiving everything around us is incorrect, and starts to have us move towards a more correct way of looking at things in dependence upon the sign that we realized of the non-affirming negative, that things don't have the kind of mode of existence that we kind of thought that they did. So it's a progression of taking our minds from where mine's at, where I haven't realized anything about, one side of every phenomenon in the world, in the universe, and I've added something on to every phenomenon in the universe that's just not there. And the more I study, the more I come to find out about this addition that I've been doing. And eventually I'll be able to realize directly that this addition that I've been doing is really incorrect and it's unfindable. And this true existence that I've been believing in, this concrete appearance, this concrete apprehension that I've been kind of adhering to, that's making me make a lot of polluted decisions, isn't there. And I'm being convinced more and more through studying that this non-finding will sink in to, more and more and more to the place where it will be a deep understanding that will then go from just a picture of what this thing is that we speak of, that's incomprehensible and unspeakable, that we try to speak about, to a direct realization of it. And that's how we make these teachings firsthand information, by discovering these stages for ourselves. And these stages of the path to enlightenment are presented so clearly, and we're so fortunate to have them in various levels of understanding. We look at what Buddha Shakyamuni presented, and then the Nalanda Pandit's tradition, the Nalanda Pandits presented. So the Kanjur, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and then the Tenjur, the authentic Indian commentaries. And then we get through into the Tibetan tradition and see all the incredible commentaries, and the Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Gelug tradition. What a rich, rich basis of information we have from which to look at, magnify, and use to transform our mind. So usually when we get started, of course, we imagine the merit field and so forth. And sometimes we do a really, really big look at that merit field and talk about the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage and the lineage of blessings and the Tibetan masters, and we name them all. So what I thought we'd do tonight, in seeing the kind of life story, it connects to this process that we're doing and why we're doing it. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight about one very important master, related to actually two important masters related to what we've been really focusing on. And it'll make sense how it relates to visualizing the merit field in a moment. But we've reached in the stage of the path to enlightenment, in this poem, the section where we get into the actual Mahayana, where we get into the teachings on bodhicitta. And we've been going over aspiring bodhicitta, and we've been going over the specific process to generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment, found in the extensive deeds lineage, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga, and then down through various masters to Lord Salimpa, Master Salimpa, then to Lord Atisha and Master Drontompa, and then various other Tibetan masters, and then eventually from our root teachers and our teachers' mouths to our ears, in an unbroken lineage. So we've been talking about this specific instruction, which has a preliminary step of equanimity, has 6 causes once you get into the body of the practice, and then one result, which is actually bodhicitta. So we've been looking at this practice of equanimity that then goes to recognizing all sentient beings as our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, great compassion, the extraordinary attitude, or altruism it's called, and then actual bodhicitta. So we've been talking about this practice, and we say passed down in the extensive deeds lineage from Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how that actually became possible. First, we'll talk about Lord Maitreya just briefly. This is more about the story of how they meet and so forth. But let's briefly talk about who Lord Maitreya is, because sometimes it can be confusing. Lord Maitreya is called the future Buddha, but then in some texts you find out, or you come to find out, that this future Buddha, Lord Maitreya, was actually Buddha Shakyamuni's student, but actually became enlightened before Buddha Shakyamuni. So even though he's the future Buddha, if we look at the teachings, we'll come to find out that there are such teachings that say that the future Buddha actually became a Buddha before Buddha Shakyamuni. And then just out of devotion to his teacher, because, previously Buddha Shakyamuni in previous lives was his teacher, he paid homage by staying close to the teacher. So you'll see various, and then you'll see also Lord Maitreya as a bodhisattva, of course, in the Rice Seedling Sutra. You'll see Maitreya as a bodhisattva who, is engaging in the Rice Seedling Sutra with Master Shariputra, and they're having a dialogue about, something that the Buddha said about a rice seed. So you can look into that. So anyway, Lord Maitreya is considered the future Buddha. So in the eon that we're in, the particular time period that we're in, call it an eon or a kalpa, it is said that 1,000 Buddhas will come. Okay. And Lord Maitreya will be the fifth among those 1,000 Buddhas that will come. So when we look at the actual order of the Buddhas, we see that the first Buddha, now that doesn't mean the first Buddha ever. This doesn't mean that we are asserting there was a first Buddha. We're not stating that. There were Buddhas before this grouping, but this grouping is related to this particular eon, this particular time period. And when we say this one, we don't mean like years apart. There's millions and millions of years between Buddha Shakyamuni and Maitreya's coming. So basically, Maitreya will be the fifth. So when we look at the order, the first Buddha in this 1,000 series, and Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche used to carry with him always a text everywhere that he went, that was the 1,000 Buddhas text. It had the names of the 1,000 Buddhas and so prophecies and so forth. We never got a teaching on it, but this is something that Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche carried with him everywhere. So the first of these 1,000 Buddhas is called Buddha Krachukanda. So this is the first among the Buddhas. And I'll double check that just to make sure that I'm not giving you misinformation. Yes, so the first Buddha is Buddha Krakuchanda. And then the second Buddha was Buddha Kanakamuni. That's easier to remember. And then not everyone, but many of you have heard of the third Buddha, Buddha Kashyapa. And then the fourth Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni. That's our Buddha of our particular time. So I know I just said of a time. There's a greater time where all these 1,000 Buddhas will come, millions and millions of years between each other. That's considered a time. But the Buddha of our time, meaning our lifetime, the one we're referring to, the one we talk about when we say the teacher, Sugata, protector, we're talking about Buddha Shakyamuni, the fourth among this series of 1,000 Buddhas. The fifth Buddha will be Lord Maitreya. And we see in the pictures of Lord Maitreya, he's not actually sitting in Vajra posture. He's actually sitting in a chair, ready to get up to become the next Buddha to come to this world. Okay, so a little bit of background on Lord Maitreya, and it is said that when Buddha Shakyamuni came to this world and he was in Tashita giving teachings, he handed the crown to Maitreya and said, now you reside here, where Lord Maitreya is said to reside in Tashita and continue to teach, and you'll then be the next Buddha to come after me. So we find all of these prophecies and points. The point of this isn't a history lesson. It's just to give you some background on these beings that we're talking about. So we see that when we say this extensive deeds lineage is passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya, it doesn't really matter who became enlightened first. It matters that Buddha Shakyamuni was Lord Maitreya's teacher, however you slice this up. However, you look at it, this was the relationship. So we say from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga. So Master Asanga was an Indian master who became very, very qualified and learned and had reached this kind of peak of understanding in his practice and realized that he was going to need to take it further, and it was going to require him to, engage in deity yoga and for him to take on a personal yidam. So he went to his teacher and requested initiation And his teacher then, engaged in, practice where there was a flower thrown into the mandala to kind of see what, you know, Arya Sanga's kind of meditational deity would be. His teacher, who he requested, Acharya Arhat was his name. So he requested him to give him initiation, said that he needed a yidam, wanted a meditational deity. His teacher throws the flower into the mandala, and it comes to be known that his meditational deity, his root yidam, is Lord Maitreya. So then he says, okay, I'm going to go into retreat, and I'm not going to leave until I directly see Lord Maitreya. So there's different types of retreat that you can go into. One type of retreat is where you'd say, I'm going to count 100 million mantras or 1 million mantras or 100,000 mantras, and I won't leave until this is completed. Another kind, that's a counting retreat. Another kind of retreat that you can go into is you say, I'm going to stay for this specific period of time. That's another kind of retreat, a timed retreat. And then there's like a practice, realizational retreat. This is a third kind where you say, I'm not going to leave until I have this specific kind of realization occur. I'm just going to be here until that happens. And Arya Sangha decided that he was going to go into a cave, and until he had, he was going to engage in like getting closer, the practices of getting close approximation and mantra recitation and so forth, getting closer and closer to the yidam, to be able to eventually become of one taste mentally with the yidam. So he was trying to ripen his mind more and more, and engage in these practices to be able to see Lord Maitreya directly. So 3 years go by, and he's not having any realization. He's not having any success in his practice in terms of what his goal is. So he becomes frustrated and actually becomes discouraged and gives up and leaves the cave. So 3 years have gone by. He leaves the cave. There's variations of this story, but Rinpoche told it a lot of times. So I want to just share this with you. So he and then I have the ending part of it I can read from the biography, but it's not necessary for me to read this part. I heard it so many times. So then he becomes discouraged, and Asanga actually leaves the cave after 3 years and says that it's just too much. I'm doing everything that I can. It's been 3 years. I'm not seeing any signs of accomplishment. I'm doing all these mantras and visualizations, and I don't feel like I have this closeness. I haven't reached this, direct connection with Lord Maitreya. So he leaves the cave, and he notices on the side of the cave wall, there's a place where birds have been going in and out to get into their nest. And he sees that from that process of the bird going in and out, the wing has made actually an impression in a rock. And he thought to himself, if a wing can be moved enough times to actually make an impression in a rock, that's a sign that I just haven't put enough effort in. If even a wing can make an impression in a rock with enough effort, then also I too just, can have this result. I just haven't put in the effort. So, Arya Sangha then goes back into the cave. And, think about, how you've been in a cave 3 years, and, the kind of mind, the kind of perseverance this kind of mind has that, obviously doesn't think it's going to take 3 years going in. Maybe who knows, thinks it's going to be a lot quicker than this. And then, to be able to just see this sign, to just snap him back into the perseverance, this commitment that he had made, this knowing that he had to get connected to this, have this close proximity to the deity, or it wasn't going to be further on a spiritual path. And all he wanted to do was become a Buddha. So he knew that this was part of his process. He knew that one in just the perfection vehicle wouldn't be able to achieve complete Buddhahood. So he goes back in the cave, another 3 years. Now 6 years have passed. Nothing has really happened. He hasn't been able to achieve the realizations he was looking for. He hasn't seen Maitreya, and he leaves the cave discouraged. And then he notices somewhere that water is dripping. And this water that's dripping is actually leaving impressions in a rock. So He's saying that, if water can break a rock, if water can break through this solid material, I should be able to break through these obstacles. And I just haven't put in enough effort. Um, so now, he's gone for 3 years. He comes out. He, sees the bird wing and he thinks he hasn't done enough effort. Now, in 6 years, he comes out and he sees this drip in the rock and says, I just have to put in more effort, and goes back into the cave. 3 more years pass. And he becomes again discouraged. I think all of us could understand that. So now he's sat there for 3 years, didn't have anything happen, sees a bird wing, and then goes back in. Then he's now in 6 years, comes out, nothing's happened, and he sees the water drip, and then he goes back in, and then he comes out 9 years, and then he goes back in, and then he comes out, and he realizes that this isn't really working. So he's become completely discouraged, and he actually starts to walk to town. He says, I stayed these 3 years, and then I stayed another 3 years, uh, and then I stayed another 3 years, and just this, nothing is happening. So he's very depressed. And he's walking into town and he sees this very strange thing. He encounters an older man who's making needles out of iron, and he's doing it by rubbing them with and sharpening them down with cotton. So he sees that this is happening, and he asks, what are you doing over there? And he says, oh, I'm just finishing up this needle. Look, there's a whole pile over there of the ones I've gotten done already. And Asanga then gets the point, that, there obviously is a tremendous amount of effort being put in for something very ordinary, for something very mundane. And I'm trying to make something very super mundane, something very special happen. How could I not do more? So he goes back in the cave for another 3 years. So now we're at 12 years. He's been in the cave meditating, and he is fed up. He doesn't know what to do, and he leaves the cave and he comes upon a dog who's very, very sick. And the dog has wound on its hind, on its side, and there's maggots that are festering and crawling around in it. And he, is very, very moved by great compassion, and he thinks that if these worms aren't removed from this dog, the dog's going to die. But if I just get these worms out, if I just wash these worms out, if I just come up with what you would normally come up with, if I just do what ordinary people would do to get these worms out of the dog, then I'd be hurting the worms too. And I've recognized this love for all beings, and I have compassion for all beings. So then Master Asanga then says, comes up with a plan, and goes just a little ways away, and because he doesn't have any knives or anything, he doesn't have anything like that. He's in a cave. He doesn't have that sort of thing. So he goes to town and gets something sharp and comes back and cuts a little piece of his flesh out, and then tries to, retrieve these maggots, these worms, from the dog by moving them, by saying, okay, if I, take them out of the dog, they don't have anything else to eat. And if I just discard them, even if I get them out gently, they don't have any food. So if I give them my own flesh in place of the dog's flesh, at least they'll still be nourished. But now I have to figure out how to get them out of the dog. So out of great compassion, Master Asanga begins to bend down, and he closes his eyes, and he realizes that he can't use his fingers to remove these worms because they'll hurt hurt the worms and hurt the dog. He has to be as gentle as possible because he's engaging in non-harm. He has love and compassion for all beings. He wants all beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness and be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And that means the dog, that means the worms, the maggots, that means everything is equal in his mind. So he bends down and he says, I know I can't remove them with my hands. So the softest part of my body are my lips and my tongue. So I can then suck these worms, these maggots, out of the dog's hind, and then I can then place them gently in my own flesh that I've cut from my arm so that they can feast on it. So the moment that he bends down, he puts his lips to the dog to begin to try to remove these maggots, and he doesn't feel anything. He doesn't feel any texture. He can't figure out what's happened. He's just been brave and he's just tried to, out of an unbiased love for every being, seeing those maggots and saying, Mama, you were so kind to me. Seeing that dog and saying, Mama, you were so kind to me. He's done this brave act of trying to remove them with his lips, and he feels nothing. And when he opens his eyes, he sees Lord Maitreya. Okay, so I'll read this then to you. When he opens his eyes, the dog had vanished, and instead he beheld Maitreya, displaying all the marks and signs of a fully enlightened being. Asanga burst into tears, crying, Oh, my father, my refuge, all those years I made hundreds of efforts in my practice without result. When I was thirsty and scorched with the sufferings, why did you not release the mighty rains of your ocean-like clouds? Why did you show me so little compassion? Then Maitreya answers, As it is said, although the king of the gods release rain, impotent seeds do not sprout. Likewise, although Buddhas appear, they are not experienced by those who lack good fortune. I was in your presence constantly, yet because of karmic obscurations, you were unable to see me. However, your negativities and obstacles were purified by your reciting many mantras and by cutting your own flesh out of great compassion. Now you're able to meet me. Maitreya continued, but in order to see this for yourself, take me back and carry me to your town. So just to prove that karmic obstacles are so strong and that you have to be purified to see certain appearances, go to town and see what everyone sees. So Maitreya then goes to town. He carries Maitreya to town. Some say on his back. He says, "Carry me to town." So he puts him on his back. And Arya Sangha carries Lord Maitreya to town on his back, and he's expecting everyone to say, like, "Wow, you've brought Lord Maitreya to town," and then everybody just sees like a crazy person kind of carrying a dog around. And there's one woman who could see, who saw that it says that there's Maitreya, although one woman who could sold wine saw a Sangha carrying a dead dog on his shoulders, and that brought her endless good fortune. One porter saw Maitreya's feet, whereupon he found himself in a state of samadhi and attained all the magical, common, and clairvoyant powers. And at this time, a Sangha himself realized the samadhi called continuum of reality. So some people couldn't see anything. Some people could actually see a dog. Some people saw actual leg of or a foot of Lord Maitreya. So it showed that showed Arya Sangha that purification was necessary to be able to have more advanced realizations. And this is why he went into the cave, was to be able to get a closer proximity to his deity. So then Lord Maitreya asks him, what's your ambition now that you've done this? He said, I would like to revive the Mahayana. Arya Sangha replies, because there's a decline at this point in time in history of the Mahayana. And then Lord Maitreya says to Arya Sangha, hold my robe, and then takes him to Tashida. And then, spends a time in Tashida, which, would have been a really long time. It says that they ascended to Tashida, where they stayed for 50 human years. It's sometimes said that this period was only 25 years because only 1/2 year on year passes for a year in Tashida. So there's some math. You can do the math yourselves. That's not the important part of the story, obviously. So he brings him to Tashida and then teaches him various texts, teaches him various practices, teaches him practices like the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And then Arya Sangha brings back uh, the various treatises of Maitreya's doctrine, the 5 treatises, the discrimination of phenomena and the nature of phenomena, the discrimination of the middle way and extremes, the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras, the ornament for clear realization, and then the sublime continuum of the great Mahayana. So we find these 5 great texts brought back. And then, of course, Lord Asanga has the 5 texts and then the 2 compendiums. The 5, I think I can get the list for you. The 5 treatises on the levels of yogic practice, the compendium of ascertainments, the compendium of bases, the compendium of enumerations, and the compendium of explanations. And then the 2 compendiums, I know they're just separate, the compendium of knowledge and then the compendium of the Mahayana. So just some background. So you can see here the couple points to the story just to get to know who we're talking about, first of all. And we can find the list of the Buddhas, and Meditation on Emptiness is the very old one. There's a brand new one you can get, a hard copy. It's on sale right now. Beautiful, beautiful text. We're so excited that it's out. And it's just a jewel wealth of information. So, and then there's another text from LTW, Library of Tibetan Works of Archives, called the Indian Buddhist Pandits. And this will give you a lot of the Indian Buddhist Pandits biographies, and you can get to know them and see this is from a Tibetan text translation. So this is good to have and to know about, so you can know more about what we're doing. So you can see here that a master who's totally realized had to remove obstacles and had to engage in practices and had to ripen his mind, just like we have to ripen our mind. And that's why we engage in these practices. This is why we envision the merit field. We are trying to get closer and closer to these beings. We're trying to remove obstacles in our mind to meeting with the truth of suchness, meeting with the teachings of the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage, so that in our future lives, if we aren't enlightened in this life, we're able to meet with the authentic, exactly correct teachings so that we can continue our spiritual path. We can continue progressing in this flawless path that's been passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni through these Nalanda Pandits and so forth. So just imagine now, in the space in front of you, holy beings like the ones that I've just mentioned are right there. These beings that teach us exactly what we need to do to transform our minds, to teach us the teachings for beings of small capacity, medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity. Teach us all of the things that are necessary so that we can then come to understand that there's one vehicle that eventually leads to the complete unsurpassable enlightenment, complete Buddhahood. And we were just talking about Lord Maitreya, and one of the texts that we mentioned among the 5 was Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realizations, and that's where we get our definition for bodhicitta, the wish to achieve unsurpassed enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So we see this in Lord Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realizations, this definition that we say over and over again. So we're so blessed by these beings that we envision in the space in front of us in these various lineages. So however you can do it in the best way that you can. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni, imagine His Holiness the Dalai Lama, an embodiment of compassion, embodiment of Lord Chen Rezigan, embodiment of Kalachakra, all of the various yidams. Imagine your root lamas, all the lamas I just mentioned, the beings of the extensive deeds, profound view lineage, the lineage of blessings. Imagining all the holy beings of the Tibetan masters, Nyingma Kagyu Sakya Galupa, all the holy beings, the 4 classes of Tantra, highest Yoga Tantra, Performance Tantra, and Action Tantra, protector deities, the 35 Buddhas, all of these beings, imagining them in the space in front of you, and imagining that you're connecting with them in such a way that they're present, they're right here. Whenever you call upon these enlightened beings, they're there with you. It's just whether or not we have the ability to see them. We have the ability to have the karma to see their presence. It says here that Lord Maitreya says to Arya Sangha, I was in your presence constantly, yet because of karmic obscurations, you were unable to see me. However, your negativities and obstacles were purified by reciting many mantras and by cutting your flesh out of great compassion. So obviously Arya Sangha, if he realized he couldn't go any further without getting into the tantric path, he had already realized the ideas of the mind that aspires to enlightenment and bodhicitta and so forth, and had these kind of practices in his mind, or at least ripened his mind with these kinds of ideas before. So we have to do the same thing if we want to be able to have the realizations, if we want to be able to have our mind be set at a place of complete ease, to be set at a place of complete wisdom and a knowing place where there wasn't any kind of misunderstandings that would ever take place in our mind again. We have to set the groundwork. So this is what we do to set the groundwork. Imagine these holy beings in the space in front of you, and now out of compassion saying, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I'm attending this teaching for the sake of all sentient beings. I want to be able to achieve the realizations and the results that are mentioned in these great texts that I'm talking about, in the sutras and the authentic Indian commentaries and all of these processes and stages. I want to be able to go through them and achieve them, and I want to be able to understand them. I'm at this teaching in order to do that, in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. This is the highest aspiration that you can have. It's the gold-making elixir, this mind of bodhicitta, that mind that wishes to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, that isn't just a kind of an afterthought. It's a mind that once you generate it, doesn't leave. It's there day and night, and in whatever action or activity one engages in, it's just there. It's there penetrating everything and making everything that you do a cause for enlightenment. So generate this mind. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, even if it's in a contrived way. We'll read about that in a little bit. Even if it's fake, we'll read about how to apply this in our daily life when we get into the next part of the teaching. But do the best that you can to try to share this gift with all sentient beings, because you'll eventually, when you become a Buddha, the way that you will help all sentient beings is by teaching them the truth of suchness, by teaching them at their varying levels, at their various aptitude, exactly what it is that they need to hear in order to move from wherever they are at spiritually to the place of complete perfection. So recognizing that that is the goal, that's what you'll eventually be able to do. So imagine now that we're setting a mental basis in our mind. When we look at Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, we see that that first section in the bodhicitta section talks about basis, and we have mental basis and physical basis. So there's various mental bases that we need to generate before we can actually generate aspiring bodhicitta. And we talk about part of it is this 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment that we've been talking about in the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. But these are very, very advanced practices that require a lot of foundation, that require the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity and the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity in order for them to really be generated. So we practice these things. We try our best to connect with these goals that we have. So we tell our minds that this is something that we want. We're inspired by these kinds of teachings. And then we eventually can aspire to have this kind of mind. And these kind of states of mind of inspiration and then aspiration determine, you know, how we react and interact with the whole entire world and our way of thinking and being. So we're trying to just make our minds more and more and more like the ideal minds that these bodhisattvas have. And the only way that we can do that is by practicing it. It's not something that can just come about out of nowhere. It's not something that's causeless. This main mind of bodhicitta that we talk about so lightly is something that is an effective state of mind that has to have a cognitive process that makes it come about. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. And we're so blessed that we get to practice things like we're practicing tonight, practicing sharing the teachings with all sentient beings by inviting them in the ways that we've learned through these practices. We've been putting the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment under a magnifying glass. And we've been looking at it through the eyes of, through the sutras and the descent into the Lanka Sutra and the Master Arya Sanga's levels of yogic deeds, the quote in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, and then looking at it through the eyes of the various Dalai Lamas, the first Dalai Lama and the third Dalai Lama and the fifth Dalai Lama and the seventh Dalai Lama and the current Dalai Lama, the wish-fulfilling jewel that walks on the same earth that we walk on. We're so fortunate. And looking at Pabonka Rinpoche's commentary and the two Panchen Lamas commentaries to really get to know these steps, to get to know what are some of the tricks of the trade, tricks of the yogis, tricks that I could apply to my mind to make it quicker for it to evolve to those states of peace, those states of kind of calmness that are promised, by these masters if we are able to ripen our minds. So let's imagine, based on the practices that we've been doing, based on our practice of equanimity, where with equanimity, we looked at our neutral beings and we looked at friends and then we looked at difficult beings and our reactions and tried to create a ground that was ready and willing and open-minded enough to be of benefit to all those various types of beings. We've done some work with that, and we've done some work with the idea of all beings as our mother and remembering their kindness and wishing to repay their kindness. That's actually where we're at under the microscope right now. So let's look at it in terms of that. And we see that when we get to that actual practice, when we start to look at our object of observation, we begin with those who are close to us. We begin with our mother. We begin with those who are our friends. And then we move on to neutral beings. And then we move on to those beings that are difficult. So invite all sentient beings here to be your guests, to be able to share with them this Dharma teaching, so that you're leading them here to be able to hear this, to be able to hear the Heart Sutra and all of these things, to be able to clear away their obstacles. So they, like Arya Asanga, was able to clear away his obstacles, can clear away their obstacles, and eventually meet with their meditational deity, the way that Arya Sangha met with Lord Maitreya. So again, we're laying the groundwork in our mind, making our minds familiar with a process that will just become spontaneous when we're Buddhists, to go, to every single sentient being in the universe, just sending bodies and sending things they need, just sending, ways and means to help them evolve, help them to be able to, as I said, wherever they are on their spiritual path, evolve a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And that's what we're trying to do, evolve a little bit further and a little bit further by doing these practices. And eventually we'll be able to speak in the language of gods, humans, and yaksas, and the language of humans and demons, as it says in as we read in the King of Aspiration prayers, and we'll be able to do it with these 60 melodious ways of speech, and we'll have this excellent quality of speech, and we'll have these excellent quality of body. We'll be able to send bodies out to all beings, and this mind that knows exactly what's needed, and these enlightened activities we can read about in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. But there's kind of like unimaginable things that are told to us that can be achieved. These kind of ideas that, seem like very big ideas, come from the smaller things that I'm able to do right now, which is share the Dharma with you. Imagine that I can do these languages of all beings and try the best I can to bring all sentient beings here, friends, neutrals, and difficult beings, hell, hungry, ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods, the God's realm, desire realm gods, and the form and formless realm gods, and trying my best to connect, even if it's in kind of a contrived way, with every being in the universe, because my object of observation of my love and compassion when I become a Buddha will be every single sentient being in the universe. And it won't ripen into that potential until I've been able to work on that in my little ways of working on it, by thinking of all the beings I can possibly think of, and then like a stadium filling in these other kinds and types of beings that I read about in the Lam Rim that I may or may not believe, but have to be willing that there's things that I haven't seen, that you know that are out there, because that happens all the time. We use that example of hundreds of years ago. How would somebody on this, side of the world believe that there were snakes that were rainbows in the rainforest, and these creatures that could ever look like, you I don't know how far back you'd have to go to have somebody who wouldn't, on one side of the world, wouldn't know about this. But just think about that. Think about how strange kinds of creatures there are. And if you told someone, back then, that there were these strange creatures in the rainforest, that they would say, this just sounds crazy and this can't be true. So keep an open mind when you read about these various realms and levels, and realize that it can get a whole lot worse than anything that you've ever seen. And here are some ways that it could get worse. And just keep your mind open to that potential. And, when we're bringing all of these beings here, just one kind of trick, because this is all meant to just kind of transform our mind. When we're thinking about these friends and neutrals and difficult people and enemies, when we see our reaction to difficult people or people we would consider enemies, we see what our mind does. It's different. If you're anything like me, something different happens there. We have to recognize, if this person that we're thinking about is, in conventional terms, this really horrendously bad person that hurts a lot of people, then we're so quick to just kind of move on to hell, hungry ghosts, and animals, and then feel so bad for lobsters when they're being put into a pot. But what we need to connect, when we see, animals freezing out in the cold, because this is what we can see. We don't see hell and hungry. I don't have those kind of realizations. I see animals struggling outside. When we see them, we're so quick to say, oh my gosh, I feel so bad for them. Why do you feel so bad for them? They're victims of their karma. But then when we see someone we don't like, who we consider a monster, we are not willing to, make that move in our mind at that moment to say that, oh, look at their afflictions, just turning them into this monster. They're victims of their karma. And then our reaction, we feel justified in our anger. And then we move on to these poor souls who are in the lower realms, but we aren't recognizing that it's our angry reaction that's planting a seed that will ripen eventually, if we don't purify it or get our acts together really quickly and start becoming liberated into that same exact state of existence. The same exact state of existence, just like the person who's angry and yelling, and person who's we're considering a monster, is this being we're so quick to cuddle with and say and have compassion for. But they're the exact being that was a monster, because results are dependent upon their causes. And results are concordant with their causes. So when we see these things that we're so quick to have compassion for, if we back up and see that that was caused by something that right now we're so unwilling to have compassion for, there's a kind of dissonance that starts to kind of take place in our mind. Why am I not having compassion for this being who's under the sway of afflictions right now, who seems like a monster who's in front of me, but I'm having compassion for the result of that? And I'm willing to see the vulnerability, and I'm willing to see that this person isn't independent. This poor creature that's out in the cold is just a victim of their karma and their results and their previous actions. But I'm not willing to see it in the case of sometimes I feel are difficult, or these beings I see on the news, or, that are considered, even in conventional terms, to be awful beings. So yeah, it's just something that we have to think about. We're doing this practice to reveal our minds, to reveal what our minds are doing that are keeping us from our ultimate happiness. And the only way we can do that is really by paying attention, by being conscientious, by having mindfulness and introspection, kind of cranking away throughout our day. And the only way that that occurs is by practice, is by getting familiar with this stuff, is by ripening our minds, is by becoming closer and closer and closer to these practices. Arya Sangha was trying to get this close approximation, closer and closer to Lord Maitreya, because he had this closeness with the practices that made him ready to have this next level of closeness. We need to get close to these teachings. We need to make them taste like something in our mouths, not just hearing about what a grilled cheese tastes like, tasting what a grilled cheese tastes like. This is what we're trying to do, have an experience. So I don't mean to go on and on and on about this connection with the merit field and calling all sentient beings here. Sometimes it takes half the teaching, but the point of these teachings is for us to be able to change and for us to be able to set up bases within our minds that allow us to move closer to our goals. So inviting all these sentient beings here, and now hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigods, gods. And now we imagine that the merit field in the space in front of us transforms into Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain. We see there Buddha Shakyamuni and Venerable Shariputra and Master Chenrezig, there, Bodhisattva Chenrezig is there. And we imagine that we're there now with all sentient beings witnessing this miracle of the definitive teaching given at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha meant what he said. The Buddha said that nothing, not the Four Noble Truths, not the Buddha, not the mind, not any phenomena, nothing in the universe has inherent existence. And this was shocking. This was groundbreaking information, even for the Buddha's students at this time, in terms of the turnings of the wheel of Dharma, because this seemed to be contradictory to what the Buddha said at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma in relation to the Four Noble Truths, and so forth. So the point of this is that the Buddha came and gave this ultimate medicine, gave us this medicine that showed exactly what was wrong with our minds that was creating cyclic existence. This ignorance, the Buddha came to show us and shine a light on. And what is this ignorance? It's an ignorance that sees things as being inherently existent. There is a mode of existence that things have and a mode of existence that things do not have. And unfortunately, the mode of existence that we think they have is wrong. And from that incorrect understanding, appearance of the mode of existence of phenomena, we make a lot of really big mistakes in judgment. So we think that things have this concrete, inherent existence, intrinsic existence, existence by way of its own character, established by way of its own character, existence right within the object, findable from its own side, all of these things that we hear so much about, that when we talk about emptiness, we think that there's this mode of existence. It appears to our sense consciousness, 24/7, and we apprehend it 24/7, unless we're having like a direct perception of emptiness, which I don't know about you, I have not had. I have not realized emptiness. So 24/7, I'm having this appearance and this kind of wrong idea about the way that things exist. So what's the big deal about that? Well, the Buddha came to say that's the whole big deal. The Buddha came to tell us something very different than other teachers up to that time had come to tell us. And the Buddha came to teach the miracle of dependent origination. So what does that have to do with what's this positive thing I'm talking about, dependent origination, and the emptiness of inherent existence have to do with each other? So I think that that chair over there and this microphone here and the screen here and those sandals over there exist from their own side. I don't question it. Now I do, because I've been introduced to philosophical training and stuff, so I think about it. But generally speaking, someone who's not introduced to kind of philosophy would agree with even me, who's been introduced to philosophy, that the way that those things that I just mentioned appear is that they appear to exist from their own side. They absolutely do not appear like they're coming merely as an imputation of my mind. They definitely appear like everything in this room is solid. Uh, I appear to myself to inherently exist and be here as something that isn't coming from my mind. My hands, I sitting here. I feel very concrete, when I kind of just sit back and have like a natural feeling about me. I feel very, very concrete. When I look at you across from me, I see myself, I see other, I see this concrete self, I see this concrete other, I see these two selves of person that I'm sure are concrete and exist from their own side and inherently exist. And all the other stuff of phenomena that aren't persons, I feel inherently exists. And the problem with that is, it sounds like, okay, so what's the problem with that error? Okay, it just sounds like fancy philosophy. Well, there's a problem when I say mode of existence, it just sounds like fancy philosophy. But there's a problem if I'm misapprehending things. So the Buddha says that I am in this Heart Sutra. If I'm misapprehending things in some way, I better find out if it's true or not. So the Buddha says that, yes, you are misapprehending things. So what does that mean, that I'm misapprehending things? The Buddha says that you think that things are coming from their own side, that they're right in the basis of designation. You're naming stuff. I have to do this, put the puzzle piece in here. Hold on here. I'm doing I'm not a robot stuff. So you think that like you have a name of something, like, and that there's a thing over there, and that you're just like slapping the right name on this basis of designation, and that thing exists from its own side, as a chair, or a microphone, or as a Jeff, or as a whoever else is on, or as a Michael, exists, right as that thing that I say that it is. That there's some sort of synonymous equivalency there. So, but the Buddha says there's not. But the Buddha says that things exist. So there's got to be a way that I can test this, and there's something called the Four Essentials, and we'll go over it real quickly. The Buddha came to say that things don't intrinsically exist. So what does that mean? But the Buddha said that things exist because nihilism was taught a whole bunch before that and will be taught a whole bunch after that. So what's the Buddha talking about? He's not talking about nihilism, because the Buddha didn't come to teach nihilism. That'd be easy. So the Buddha is talking about some mode of existence that isn't the way that I think about it. So let me see if the way that I think about it's right. So when we look at the Four Essentials, we say that, okay, what's the object of negation? Intrinsic existence. So the Buddha here in the Heart Sutra is saying that things don't intrinsically exist. And we've gone over this a lot, so I'm just going to talk about this more loosely. The Buddha is saying that things don't intrinsically exist. And what that would mean is that they don't exist from their own side. They don't exist separately. They only are merely imputed by the mind. When you come to read on what the Buddha comes to say later beyond this sutra, and the Indian pandits come to say, but I don't believe you. I believe in what I believe. I believe that the way that I see everything around me is the way that it is. So then there's got to be a way to see if I'm right or the Buddha's right. Because the Buddha told me, don't have blind faith. The Buddha said, like a goldsmith, you would cut and rub the gold. If you were in a market where they were selling a bunch of fake gold and real gold, you make sure you got the real gold by checking it. Likewise, don't just, out of faith in me, listen to what I'm saying, check my teachings for accuracy. So there's got to be something that I can do to see if what I think or what the Buddha thinks is correct. Because I don't think what the Buddha thinks, if I'm really, really, I have doubts about the way that I think, but, if what the Buddha is saying and what I'm thinking don't tally, there's a kind of a crash, a car crash that happens. So if what I think is true, there's got to be a way to figure it out. So if what I think is true, then I'm going to find it. I'll prove the Buddha's wrong. I'm going to prove the Buddha doesn't know. So I think things intrinsically exist from their own side. The Buddha says no. So the Buddha says that's the object of negation. That's the thing you've got to, get rid of out of your mind, this idea that things intrinsically exist. And I say, well, I don't believe you because I think they do. So let's see. where could this thing be? It would have to intrinsically be one with its parts. I mean, all this stuff, I've got parts, Jeff's got parts, microphone's got parts, chair's got parts, sandals got parts. I've got to be able to find this intrinsically existent thing that I says exists from its own side, intrinsically one with its parts. And if I can't find it there, and I still am saying that I know things intrinsically exist, I've got to be able to find it somewhere that's separate outside of those parts. And then the entailment of emptiness, the emptiness of intrinsic existence, is that if there's only two possibilities of my assertion that things are intrinsically existent, they've got to be either right there in their parts or somewhere else. If I can't find them there, and those are the only two possibilities in the entailment of emptiness, is if I can't find, the thing to be intrinsically one with its parts or intrinsically separate from its parts, then it's necessarily not intrinsically existent. That's the entailment of emptiness. So you start to subject things to this and see where you arrive at. So what you end up arriving at, according to the text, is that non-affirming negative we hear so much about, a non-finding, a mere non-finding. Nothing else is posited in its place. It's a phenomena found through a mere negation. Nothing else is put in its place or implied. So that's the ultimate analysis, according to Buddha, will arrive at a non-finding of the intrinsic existence of the object that you, and if you're who you appear to be, and I think is there. We won't find what we think is there. So, okay, big deal still. You still haven't told me how this matters in any way, shape, or form. It just sounds like fancy stuff. Well, in Arya Nagarjuna's Muya Madhyamika Karika, he says that the ceasing of karma and afflictions is nirvana. Karma and afflictions arise from conceptualization of an inappropriate attention, which in turns arise from elaboration of self-grasping ignorance, and elaboration cease into emptiness. So according to Arya Nagarjuna, explaining what Buddha said, he's saying that from this self-grasping ignorance, grasping at the self of person, Jeff's and John's and Michael's, as being inherently existent, and self of phenomena, cars and trucks and sandals and stuff like that, and microphones, and dependence upon grasping at these things as being inherently existent, as having a concrete appearance. I then have an inappropriate attention that goes on, and I see things as attractive or unattractive. And the things that I see as attractive, I build up and I exaggerate their good qualities, and things that I don't think are attractive, I exaggerate their bad qualities. And then I move towards things I want and like and find attractive, and I push away and punch things I don't like and have aversion for, I find unattractive. And that then the pushing and the punching and the pulling in towards, those things are called coarse afflictions, attachment and anger. And then the ignorance that doesn't have an inappropriate attention, that's just keeps on moving in terms of grasping at intrinsic existence. And then that affliction then gives rise to our contaminated actions, that gives rise to cyclic existence. So if we don't want to have cyclic existence, if we don't want to have the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, the 3 types of suffering, those sufferings that are splattered all over Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment and Buddhist sutras, then the only way out of the pervasive compounded suffering, the mastermind forcing us into these contaminated aggregates through our contaminated karmas, afflictions, and the seed of self-grasping ignorance, throwing us over and over again into this basis beyond our control. And the lack of freedom is this misery, as you would agree. We don't want to suffer. We want to have happiness. We don't want to have partial happiness. We want full happiness. We don't want to have a partial, freedom from suffering. We don't want any suffering. And when we see that it's the grasping at things incorrectly as having a mode of existence that they don't have is the problem. It's the root of cyclic existence. We can't even achieve an abiding nirvana of a hero solitary realizer without realizing the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, let alone Buddhahood. And we find this very clear in Master Chandrakirti's writings and Master Arya Deva's writings, this clear idea that everyone has to realize emptiness in order to achieve liberation from samsara in an abiding nirvana, or Buddhahood in a non-abiding nirvana. So the Buddha was so kind to come here and teach us that there is no form, no feeling, no perception, etc. But here it's meaning that there is no intrinsically existent kind of form. The kind of form that we just said, the mode of existence of a form that we kind of talked about having intrinsic existence, it doesn't have. But then when we come out of this non-affirming negative, we have to then concur that things exist. There's things around us. There's a Jeff talking to a John and a Michael, and they're, to a different applications. There's a Jeff talking. So then we have to kind of confess that the way that we were looking at things is wrong, because we just turned back to that ultimate analysis and find out that non-affirming negative was a non-finding of intrinsic existence. And now we're back to conventional analysis, and we say that, hey, there's got to be a mode of existence that isn't what I thought. And if it's not objective existence, it's got to be subjective existence, mere imputation of the mind. So that's a long ways away from where I'm at to understanding what the implications of that are. But by relying on the great treatise in the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, by relying on illuminating the intent in these incredible, credible works by Master Baba Vega and Master Chandrakirti and Master Buddha Palita and Gonju Jayan Sheba and Panchen Sonandrapa, we can then start to understand what the meaning of this stuff is and get a clearer and clearer picture in our mind, because that's where we'll start with a picture, a generic image of the emptiness of inherent existence, where there will still be an appearance of inherent existence, and then we will eventually get to the point where that becomes less and less and less, and we have a yogic direct perception where there's no longer conceptuality, there's no longer a generic image, there's no longer an appearance of true existence. And then when we'll be superior Aryas, and then we're going to need to do it over and over and over again to be able to get to the path of no more learning. And because we're doing this in the skillful way, we're trying to do this as Mahayanists. Hopefully we'll be bodhisattvas when we see emptiness, and we'll be ultimate bodhicitta that we realize. And then hidden within this beautiful sutra, we find the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, this path of seeing, the path of meditation, the path of no more learning that comes about through this perfection that is the perfection of wisdom, that comes about through practicing the perfection of wisdom, getting acquainted with, moving closer to the warmth of the view of emptiness. That is the only liberating path, which can only be cultivated and realized through the ripening paths of renunciation and concentration and bodhicitta and so forth. So enough about that. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness, there are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no purity, no impurity, no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance of sound, No smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness, dhatu. No ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear, they transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of Prajaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra, Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son, noble family, thus it is, O son, noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Kalajibe nijo damba nengushe de junga yi de do jandru baba lama yi bujenzi nizundandro so la jazelo agazamara jandra zamara. Aga samara dashandara samara yabe te ata on gate gate paragate parasangate bodhiso papa concha sanji gaye dembe doji she obadoji meba doji shewa doji dragi baje mede beje danji je dengori zoha gerin donja je shewa da midon neve jandan dewa dan domban donji bonzon donjoji dashi de janden da de le jo. I'll make a mandala offering. Quite late, but I wanted to read the story of Lord Maitreya and Arya Sangha and show the effort that Arya Sangha put forth to try to move closer to his goal, and how those obstacles were removed by that effort that he put in, and all of those mantras and all of that meditation that he put in was not for naught. And he was able to directly meet with Lord Maitreya based on this practice, and sharing with you that make these practices personal and know that these enlightened beings are really here with you when we do this kind of special, idea of generating the merit field and so forth. Don't make it like it's, even if it's contrived, think in a contrived way that they're really here. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples, as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. And then in the mandala offering, let's insert the source of all my good, foundation of all good qualities by Lama Tsongkhapa, as a supplication to receive these blessings. And as last week we talked about, blessing, it just means like a magnificent potential, and transforming in our magnificent potential. It's not something from the outside that we're being able to have our negativities washed away, or our teacher give us their realization, like it talks about, the Buddha is not wash away our negativities or remove our miseries with his hands. The spiritual realizations aren't transferred to them. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. By teaching the truth of suchness, by teaching us how to ripen our minds can transform their magnificent potential. So we're trying to connect with these beings that know how to help us mature, how to, we have proliferating bodhicitta, and we have the, natural bodhicitta, how to mature, how to, transform and mature. That Buddha nature, rather, that Buddha nature into its fullest potential. So the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish, that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the streak froth of a wave. Bless me first to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrong of the many wrongs we do and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teaching. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest doors to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then always to keep them, even if it costs my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now, stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself the one who holds the diamond. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay, so we have a little bit of time, not much time, but we just keep doing this and we'll keep going over the pointers. Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche was so kind to ask me to continue these Lamrim teachings, and I hope that these things that I share with you are helpful for your daily practice and can help you to see how we, utilize these things, that these aren't just things that we come to know so that we can talk about them in a way that sounds sophisticated. It's so that our minds become more sophisticated, so that a compassionate mind is the most sophisticated mind. The wisdom realizing emptiness is the most sophisticated wisdom. So we're trying to really, you know, up our game, our level of sophistication. So we've been looking at this stanza, I've slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. I know that I have the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. I know that I have the suffering of meeting with the unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, not getting what I want, the suffering of the aggregates. I know, and this is from my study of the previous section of the Great Treatise of the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. Didn't come out of nowhere where I know this. I had to learn this. And the way that I learned this, you get the wisdom arisen from hearing. Rinpoche taught it and reading it in the book and reading it in a lot of texts. We've come to find that what I just said was called the 8 types of suffering. And then the 6 types of suffering, the suffering of uncertainty, the suffering of never being satisfied, the suffering of rebirth, the suffering of shucking off these bodies. Yeah, you will shuck off this body. The suffering of going from the high to the low, good to the bad. And it's all bad we come to learn about. The suffering of being alone. All these great folks we see around us won't be there to carry us through the bardo in our next life. And these are called the 6 sufferings. Why do we know this? Because we read about them in the medium scope. And we come to find out that it's indispensable in realizing this part about equanimity, the uncertainty of cyclic existence that we learn about in the medium scope. We plug right into our equanimity practice, the pre-step for the 7-point cause and effect that we've been realizing, we've been studying. So we see how crucial all of these steps are to work together to actually have our mind do something that changes. If you don't apply these in a way that's step one, step two, and use the guidelines in the meditation session right at the beginning of the first volume of the Great Treatise of the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, meditation session, refuting misconceptions about meditation, using that as a guideline on how to work our way through these various stages, teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity to the teaching of great capacity. We've really got to learn how to use these stages and use the Dharma mirror to see if we've realized the next thing we need to get there. So we have that mental basis that Panchen Sonandrapa talks about that's necessary to have the mind that aspires to enlightenment actually occur. And we've gone over that before. We'll go over it again another time. So we've been talking about this, making this occur, making this mind occur, figuring out how to make this mind occur. And we know that we've slipped and fallen into the sea of the suffering life. In the last sufferings, we might as well finish the roll. And then the three types of suffering, the suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and the pervasive condition suffering. So we've figured out we've got a problem here, and we've figured out that the three highest higher trainings are the solution at this point. And then we turn and look around and see all of these people we care about and understand and know that they don't have the three highest higher trainings and the understandings of the truth of suffering and origin of suffering to kind of know that there's a way out of this mess that we're in that we come to find out is like a prison. So we turn towards other beings, and now we are learning how to make our minds have affection for them, how to make them, objects of our love and compassion, because we've come to find out that we can't fulfill our own needs, let alone all sentient beings' needs. We can't help those people we love so much, unless we become totally qualified to help them, unless we kind of undo this self-cherishing attitude that makes us not help them fully. So we've been learning about how to undo that sucker. That's so hard to undo. And so we've talked about the equanimity practice, and we've talked about recognizing sentient beings as our mother and seeing how important, understanding Acharya Dharmakirti's, proof of previous lives is in establishing sentient beings as our mother. And we needed it also for this equanimity practice. And we needed it for the uncertainty of samsara in the medium scope. So we're reinforcing these things over and over again. Have you got it yet? Have you gotten it yet? Have you gotten it yet? The Lamrim keeps asking us this question and asks us to please be honest with ourselves. So now we've gotten to this idea of repaying the kindness of everyone. And I just kind of recount where we were last week. And then we'll probably just end here. And we'll just keep it going. And I hope everybody's reading in their spare time and doing these meditations in their spare time. And each week, maybe having a little bit more of a relationship with these steps that are required to become a bodhisattva. When you get bodhicitta, you become a bodhisattva. You become a child of the ones gone to bliss. You become a bodhisattva. You enter the path of accumulation. And you enter the Mahayana path, and it's the only entrance. So we've got to figure out how to get this mind, this main mind, that's supported by these beautiful mental factors that we don't have right now of love and compassion and unbiased attitudes and so forth, equanimity. So where we left off last time, we talked about this beautiful sutra that's mentioned throughout the Lam Rim called the Verses from the Naga's Kingdom. And I'm just going to read you that quote again about repaying the kindness of our mothers. And remember, this is Buddha recalling in a previous life when he was a Naga king named Drum, and he had a little brother named Tambur. And he went into town, and there was a really nasty person there, apparently, named Drumbeat. And this really nasty, difficult person gave him and his, Drum, the Naga king, and his little brother Tambor a real hard time. And the little brother got angry and wanted to retaliate. So does this sound familiar? There obviously a few thousand years ago, there were problems and disagreements and nasty people, and we had They had to figure out how to handle difficult people and not have it shake their path and make their path go backwards. So this is what we're learning, right? We're learning how to make our minds not be so shaken up when we meet with difficulties, when we face difficult circumstances and difficult people. So the Buddha is telling a story about how to do that through a life story of when he was a bodhisattva that was Naga. So the Buddha does this a lot, tells stories about when I was a bodhisattva, in the Tigris, when he reveals the bones inside the stupa and says, these were my bones when I was a bodhisattva. The Buddha does this, uses his life stories, previous life stories, to teach. And he says that, the advice that this king bodhisattva gave to his little brother Tambor is really, really good. So I'm going to teach you about it. And he told him that, you shouldn't meet disrespect with disrespect and persecution with persecution. You should meet it with serenity, patience, compassion, and insight, because this will accomplish actually what's best for you and what's best for others in the long run. So the Buddha, counsels the bodhisattva Drum counsels his little brother Tambor on the benefits of patience and being peaceful and having compassion, remaining like a piece of wood, like Bodhisattva Shantideva talks about when we're met with aggression. It talks about in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So the verse is from the Naga King Drum. And we're talking about repaying the kindness of our mothers. So equanimity, all sentient beings are mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness. That's where we are. And then we'll move on to love through the force of attraction, great compassion, altruism, and then the result of bodhicitta. So the goal is to become bodhisattvas eventually. And the only way it happens is first by getting renunciation, by understanding the small and medium scope, and then getting, great, love and great compassion, and then altruism, and then becoming a bodhisattva through generating bodhicitta in those steps. And then we'll look at the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice later, as we've promised. But I think we have another month or so to go on the 7-point cause and effect, the way that we're looking at it. So it says the ocean, Mount Meru, and the earth are not a burden to me, whereas not repaying others' kindness is a great burden to me. The learned praise persons whose minds are not excited, who recognize and repay others' kindness, and who do not waste others' kindness. In brief, so then Lama Tsongkhapa goes on to say, and then we'll end, I'll read this part, and we'll get into Shantideva's compendium of trainings, quote, next session. Compendium Trainings is a word commentary on Arya Nagarjuna's Compendium of Sutras. Bodhisattva Shantideva also had a compendium of sutras, but it's lost in the Tibetan script, but we have the Compendium of Trainings in Tibetan. Just a little aside, anybody who was wondering about that tonight. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, in brief, your mother. So we've been reading all of this week after week. So anybody who's new, you can go back and look at the YouTube videos. They're all there. In brief, your mother is crazed, unable to remain composed. She is blind, has no guide, and stumbles with every path as she approaches a frightful precipice. If she cannot place hope in her child, in whom can she place hope? If her child does not take responsibility for freeing her from this terror, who should take responsibility? Her child must set her free. Likewise, the madness of the afflictions disturbs the peace of minds of living beings, your mothers. So going back to what we taught at the beginning, when we see somebody who's really giving us a hard time, they're under the madness of the afflictions. They are being disturbed. Their mind is disturbed. They are not at peace, and they're engaging in something that will cause that hell realm rebirth, that hungry ghost rebirth, that animal realm rebirth that we're so quick to have compassion for. And then it says, thus they are crazed because they have no control of their minds. They lack eyes to see the paths to high status, rebirth as a human or a deity, and certain goodness, liberation, or omniscience. So then let's back it up. Let's back the car up right to the qualm. Well, how can you repay their help? No matter how much wealth and happiness your mother obtain in cyclic existence, it all deceives them. It's all the suffering of change. It's all the bait that keeps them in cyclic existence. We learned in the Lam Rim, Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Wealth, no matter how much wealth and happiness your mother obtains in cyclic existence, it deceives them. It deceives me. I've come to know it deceives me. It deceives them. This is how we make these practices real. So let's just end there. Thank you so much for your kind and patient listening. We'll get into the Pension Lozan Chiji Jetson's commentary on Three Principal Paths next week. I really wanted to go over a couple sections of that, and we'll get into Pension Lozan Yeshe's meditation on this step before we move on to love through the force of attraction. So thank you again for being so patient and allowing me to share this Dharma that's just so wonderful with you. And I just feel so blessed to be able to be here tonight. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. We don't usually jump from the introductory prayers to the dedications, but the introduction to the class was quite long, which is okay. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Ozan Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made in this presentation this evening, I apologize. I have no clue what your real aptitudes are also, so there's mistakes that I made there. I'm not a Buddha. I don't have any clairvoyance. I don't have special meditative concentration that allows me to really, really know what to say. So I can only use the guidelines of the Lam Rim and the guidelines that my teachers have shown me to be able to help you understand things the way that I was helped to understand them. That's really all that I have to offer. So any mistakes that I made in terms of presentation, if it wasn't helpful for you, I'm sorry. Or if I made a mistake in terms of a technical mistake, I apologize, and may it be purified by the Vajrasattva mantra. Om Benzasato Samayamana Valayam Benzasato Sayamajila Didameva Sudakameva Subakaimeva Anuraktameva Savasiti Me Prajasava Kamasuchi Me Kijam Shin Kurum Ha Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Benza Mame Moka Benza Bava Mahasamaya Sata Ahom Ve. May we always be protected by Baldin Lama. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Junjagala Raja Marama Jadaja Junjo Hong Jo Hong. Again, happy Losar to everybody, the year of the snake. Hopefully every moment we can do is, as Gontan Dembe Drome, great master, says, we've got to figure this trick out, how to every moment slap a virtuous imprint into our mind, every moment that we have. So may we somehow figure out how to put those imprints in. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, our wish-fulfilling jewel in our world, Lord Chenrezig, in that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains. You are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. And then the prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche that I wrote. And again, we're coming up on March 6th. Next Thursday, we'll do a special presentation because it's the anniversary of Rinpoche's passing. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music, purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Lord Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. And may all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful week this week and apply these teachings and, try to keep your mind as virtuous as possible. This is our only way to really a true peace of mind and an unlimited happiness that we all seek. So thank goodness that we've met with these just nectar-like teachings. Thank you so much. Take care. See you next time.